Welcome, student athletes. I'm Mark Elliott, the athletic director, and I thought I'd give you an update. This is one of the updates that the NCAA has asked us to do, recommended for us to speak to you, and I'd like to say a few things about some of the mandates that they're giving us and some of the things that we're doing for you as student athletes. Number one, the NCAA Division II President's Council believes that each student athlete should make an informed decision about when to participate and how they're going to participate in competition in the fall of 2020. With the approval of waivers, and new legislation, changes by the Division II, each student athlete has now the flexibility to decide their participation in competition. And so to ensure that each student athlete makes an informed decision, the President's Council has adopted some legislation, and it requires athletic departments, such as ours, to communicate the following four things to all students, and I'll go through these in order. Number one, to provide information on waivers and legislation that have changed that are approved by the NCAA Division II for student athletes due to the impact of COVID-19. All right, so here's some of the waivers and some of the legislations that we think you need to know about. First, the Division II President's Council adopted legislation to prohibit an institution from reducing or canceling athletics aid for a student athlete who by October the 1st of 2020 chooses to opt out of the countable athletically related activities, or what we call Ncaa, during the 2021 academic year due to concerns contracting COVID-19. If an athlete chooses to opt out after October 1st, it will be up to each of the institutions to decide whether it will continue their athletic aid or not. So in other words, if you want to opt out from your competition before October the 1st, athletic departments cannot take your athletic scholarships away. This legislation only applies for any athletics aid agreement signed for 2021. So it only applies for this year. However, it also stipulates that an institution may still require student athletes who opt out of Ncaa to participate in non-countable activities such as study hall, medical treatments, etc. Next, the Division II President's Council also approved an eligibility waiver. Now, this is an old rule, but it still applies to winter and spring sports athletes. They approved an eligibility waiver to all student athletes for the 2021 academic year if their team only scheduled and played 50% of the maximum allowable games. Now, this legislation happened to change last night regarding fall sports, so I'm going to probably need to read this a little bit more closely because we still haven't had enough of the interpretations, but I think this will be plain for you all to hear. Now, the NCAA Administrative Committee approved legislation yesterday to provide a season of competition waiver for all fall sports athletes. For us, that would be soccer, volleyball, and cross country, no matter how many competitions that you happen to play during the 2021 academic year as a result of the disruption and the uncertainty caused by COVID-19. The season of competition relief that was previously approved, that I mentioned just a moment ago, by the Administrative Committee will remain in place for winter and spring sports athletes. If circumstances change for winter and spring sports athletes, the Committee on Student Athlete Reinstatement will revisit this in a later discussion. All right, that was the first thing. The second thing that we needed to make you aware of was this. Review the institution's insurance coverage with student athletes who plan to compete in the fall or the spring, and to advise student athletes to review their own insurance coverage. Now, the first thing I'd like to tell you to do is make sure you call home. Make sure the person that is responsible for your own primary insurance, you need to check with them and find out what that primary insurance covers. Does it cover COVID-related health expenses? All right. All student athletes were required to carry their own primary insurance. Trevecca provides secondary insurance coverage. Our athletic insurance policy only covers athletically related injuries. That's important. It doesn't cover voluntary workouts, nor does it cover open gym injuries. It also doesn't cover any sickness or illness, including COVID-19 health-related costs. That would be for your primary insurance only. You signed an informational form in regards to Trevecca's secondary insurance coverage, if you'll remember that. The student athletes have 24-hour access to this document via your sportswear account. If a student athlete is having trouble finding the form or needs more information, he should contact their designated athletic trainer. All right, number 3, the next thing that we were supposed to inform you about. We have to inform student athletes of the risk classifications of their sports according to the NCAA Resocialization document that's called Developing Standards for Practice and Competition. There are 3 risk categories for sports, and here are our sports in the risk categories. There is a low risk category, and that's for golf and track and field. There is a medium risk category. That would be cross country, softball, and baseball. And then there's a high risk category. That would be volleyball, basketball, and soccer. Now, there's an awful lot of legislation that comes in each of those risk categories, and you can find a lot of that information on ncaa.org. I won't go over that now, but if you have any questions, again, see Desmond or anybody else in the athletic administration, and they can help you find that information about the various legislation within a risk category. All right, number 4, we need to provide information how the institution is complying with the NCAA Resocialization of Sports Developing Standards for Practice and Competition. As you remember, first, we closed all venues for the first 2 weeks of class. Very few other schools, particularly in our conference, followed this original NCAA recommendation. Next, we decided that all student athletes would have a baseline diagnostic test. And again, most other athletic departments only diagnostic test those who are going to be competing against outside competition. But we felt like we needed to go one step further to make us as safe as we possibly can for the student athletes. Our decision was to follow that follow-up and surveillance testing will be followed by the NCAA developing standards document. So surveillance testing, we're going to follow the NCAA guidance. Cross-country will be tested via the in-season surveillance recommendation for medium contact sports. Golf, as a low-contact sport, will be symptomatic testing only, as recommended by the NCAA document. All other sports will only be symptomatic testing during the fall semester. All student athletes are asked to be personally responsible, again, to the university commitment and to the athletics pledge to protect each other from the spread of the COVID-19 virus. If you have any questions about this, please visit with your coach or someone in the athletic administration. We will continue to encourage our athletes to make great decisions and act in the best interest of your teams, your teammates, and our community as a whole. Thank you for your patience and your cooperation. Best wishes for the rest of the fall semester.